Hi, ladies, and welcome to Word of the Week. As you know, as we've been journaling through the journey, we've been doing a word a week, and by the end of the year, we'll have 52 women, 52 words, and 52 stories from 52 different women. And so tonight, I have with me Robin Harris from Ashland, a coworker friend of mine down the road from us. And so, welcome, Robin.
Thank you for having me.
So, Robin, let's get right to it. What is your word for the week?
My word for the week is patience. And one of the reasons that I picked this word is because, well, I asked my friends, when you think of me, what's the one word you think of? And, you got different answers, but I think the majority of them, the one that got the most votes was patience. So that's kind of what I stuck with based on what my friends told me.
Well, I could totally agree with that because you've been so patient with me all the times I call and ask you questions. So I would agree with that. So, Robin, what is the definition of patience?
Okay, so if I look over to the left, I've got some notes over here to my left, so that
That's
I'm not
great.
I'm not looking away.
That's great.
Okay, so patience. I got a couple of definitions. The first one I found was patience is a person's ability to wait something out or endure something tedious without getting riled up. Having patience means you can remain calm even when you've been waiting forever or dealing with something painstakingly slow or trying to teach someone how to do something and they just don't get it. The other definition I have is the quality or virtue of patience is presented as either forbearance or endurance. In the former sense, it is the quality of self restraint, of not giving way to anger, even in the face of provocation, and it is attributed to both God and man and is closely related to mercy and compassion.
Wow, I really did not think about the word patience, but especially the first definition because it talks about
Uh-huh.
enduring through and waiting.
Yes, yes.
And so I never really attributed those things to it. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I wrote that down, enduring through and waiting for something
Mm-hmm.
to complete. Okay. So can you tell me, I know a lot about your testimony. I don't know what you're going to
Mm-hmm.
share tonight, but
Okay.
now I do see from a lot of things that you and I've talked about how patience really does fit
Yes.
everything that we've talked about. So tell me what
Right.
patience means to you.
Okay, so I've always felt that I was a fairly patient person, but back in '97, I think my true test of patience kind of came to fruition. In '97, it started out a great year. I had been married not even 2 years, I don't think. We dated longer than that, but and I just thought I was in a great place. I was married, I had a good job, I lived in Lexington, thought I was in just a really good place. And the only part of my life that I really think was lacking was my spiritual life. Um, my church attendance was random. My Bible reading and prayer was sporadic, and if it was happening at all. But that was obviously going to change starting in March of '97.
Okay.
So I'll just start my story. And if you think of things you want to stop me with in the middle of it, you just let me know.
Okay, sure.
Okay. So in March of '97, I was married, like I said, and there were some things going on with my husband. I knew he was struggling. I knew, he had a lot going on. His parents were getting separated after, years of being married. Um, there's just a lot going on. And I always thought, I thought we were great. I didn't think we had any problems.
Hmm.
I thought his problems were with everybody but me. Um, but that kind of came to an end one night after, several nights of just some random crazy things happening. One night he came home from work and I knew something was wrong because he came home late for one thing and didn't call. And I just point blank asked him, okay, what's going on? Why are you late? What have you been doing? What's going on? Something's up. And the answer I received was probably one of the most shocking things that's ever been said to me. He said, I don't know if I love you enough to be married to you.
Wow.
And I did not, that was like the very last thing he possibly could have said to me.
I get chills hearing you say that because I'm sure that was not the answer you were seeking to find. You wanted to hear some other kind of excuse or some other reason. After all, the problem was not with you. And
Yes.
so I can't imagine how stunned you must have been at that very moment in time.
Yeah, it's like, you literally feel like your heart has been ripped out of your chest and you just don't, I think shock. you don't know what to think, and you're thinking, okay, this is not happening. And, I know that we had a conversation. I couldn't even tell you what was in that conversation because, I was literally in shock. I know the next morning he packed some things because we decided he was going to move out. And I got up and I don't know why, only I would get up and go to work after a night like that, but I did. That's just, who does that, but me. And I went to work and, I thought, okay, I'm going to be strong. Nobody's going to know that this is going on. I walked in and my boss, who, is a really good guy, he said, "What's wrong?"
So you could see it all over your face,
yeah.
and you're really trying to hide it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was not good. And I immediately went, whoa, and I just started, losing it. So it was a really, really bad day, but luckily, I had, good people surrounding me. But that set in motion weeks of confusion, wondering what happened. How can a person love me one day and decide they don't love me the next? Didn't make sense, and he insisted that he needed space. And, I've been in places before that where I needed space. And I thought, I would have appreciated those people giving me the space that I needed. So I decided I was going to give him his space. What other choice do I have if I want to save my marriage? At least that's what I thought, so needless to say, that was kind of the point where my patience test began. So having a strong foundation of faith, because growing up, I was always in church. My family gave me a very strong foundation of faith. So that's something that, it had never left me. It had just kind of gotten away for a while.
Of course.
So I immediately turned to God for help, and he showed up big time. About 2 weeks, and I'll just describe a God moment for you. About 2 weeks after this happened, just not knowing what was going on, not knowing, what, it doesn't make sense, just confusion. I woke up a Sunday morning and something said, "You need to go to church." And, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to church. What else have I got to do on a Sunday? So I went to church, and this is a church that we had been married in. We'd known the pastor, and it's a church that we had attended sporadically, but it is usually you walk in, sit in the back, listen to the sermon, leave. You don't talk to anybody. And this particular day, when I walked into the sanctuary, something said, "Sit up front." And I don't know what it was. I mean, I know what it is now,
Yeah, right.
but I didn't know what it was then. But something pulled me to the front of that church. So during the meet and greet session, these two, people about my age, two women about my age, walked over and said, "Hey, I'm Gail." And Lynette, I think was the other person's name. They said, "Are you visiting?" And I said, "Well, I've kind of been going here for a while now. I just always sit in the back and don't really talk to anybody." And they said, "Oh, well, are you married? Are you, I don't know." And I was like, okay, I don't even know how to answer that. So I'm just going to go with separated. And it come to find out that after talking to them, they invited me to sit with them. After talking to them, I realized that one of them had literally just gone through what I was going through, and the other was going to school to be a Christian counselor. And
Wow. So God
I mean,
positioned you like right exactly
yeah.
where you
So I was like, I remember walking away from, they invited me to lunch after church. It was just like, God was like basically telling me, "You're going to be okay." I'm going to put people in your life to make you okay. And so that, that was great. They invited me to lunch, and I remember calling my mom and saying, I went to church today, and I just want to let you all know I'm going to be okay. God is going to get me through this. Before that day, I didn't know if I could get through the next minute, much less the next day or week or month or whatever it was going to take. So I just remember thinking that day, God's going to get me through this, So, they reintroduced me to the book of James. And from there, I relied on scriptures and, and just the people that God put in my life to get me through. And so I wanted to share some of the scriptures that I've come up with and kind of show you how they what things, kind of lessons I've learned about patience through some of my struggles.
Okay, great.
So one of the lessons that I've learned is that patience in the midst of struggles makes you a stronger person. I can tell you today that I am much stronger. I don't feel like there's a whole lot that could break me at this point, because, I just felt like, I feel like that, I was waiting for my husband to, I didn't know what I was waiting for, to be honest, during this time. I just knew that he needed space. I was giving him space, and I was patiently waiting for him to figure out what he, what this meant. Where does my marriage go from here? And I had to patiently wait on him. He was kind of in control of that. So one verse that comes to mind is Psalm 27:14 says, don't be impatient, wait for the Lord, and he will come and save you. Be brave, stout-hearted, and courageous. Yes, wait, and he will help you. And so, I had to really rely on God and my faith, and just knowing that, whatever tomorrow brought in this marriage, or not in a marriage, I had to wait for that. And another verse I found that kind of reminded me of this time was Psalm 62:1-2. I wait quietly before God, for my victory comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress where I will never be shaken. Now, I can't promise you that I was never shaken through this experience. I had some really bad days, and there were days that me and God had some serious talks.
I'm sure.
But at the end of the day, he always showed up and let me know that he was there and I was not alone. Another one is Romans 5:3-4. We can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they are good for us. They help us learn to be patient, and patience develops strength of character in us and helps us trust God more each time we use it, until finally our hope and faith are strong and steady.
I love that one. What do you happen to know what version that is?
I don't know offhand, but I can find out for you.
I love the way that one is, because I love looking at all the different versions sometimes.
I do too. And there's different ones.
Oh, yes, that one.
I looked up, I looked at the different versions to see which one, made the best sense to me.
And that one right there, the way you read that one, it just gives me kind of chills thinking about that is exactly worded for you with what you've gone through. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. No,
that's fine. That's fine. And then, like I said, I was reintroduced to James. So I always looked at James, for guidance too. And James 1:3-4 says, when the way is rough, your patience has a chance to grow. So let it grow, and don't try to squirm out of your problems. For when your patience is finally in bloom, then you will be ready for anything, strong in character, full and complete.
I love that version too. That is awesome.
Okay, I'll have to make sure I get these.
Actually, what you can do, you can post later on after the video and post those. That would be awesome. I love that. That's
great.
Beautiful. Okay.
Okay, so the point of those verses that I came up with was that my way was definitely rough at the time. And I remember after 2 days of thinking, I can't do this anymore. I remember thinking, I can't do this anymore. And how long is this going to go on? How long do I have to do this? I really didn't think I could take much more. And I felt like I was drowning. I felt, my life had been ripped away. My whole normal was no more. My life had been ripped away. And heartbreak is devastating, and it really hurts. Yes. And anybody that's ever gone through it can understand that. But just like the verse says, learning to be patient will make you ready for anything and a stronger person. As the days went on, my strength grew, and God placed people in my life to get me through and allow me to grow in patience. And that was not easy. I had very bad days, and days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, and there were still no answers. And I had to wait for a long time to really know what was going on with my marriage. So the next lesson, I guess I've learned, is if you wait on God and continue to do his will, even when you don't feel like it, he will fulfill his promises.
Yes. Amen, girl.
Not only was I growing in patience, but I was finding God all over again. something that I had lost in my life. And suddenly I'm going to church. I'm going to church functions. I'm singing in the choir. I mean, in the midst of all of this, I joined the choir. I'm going on Sundays, Sunday nights, Wednesdays. I'm going to functions with people my age. It was pretty crazy, to be honest.
But could you feel yourself starting to get some strength back, just a little bit of life
yes.
back into you?
Yes, definitely.
Yes. Okay. That's so good. That's so good.
Yes. So, it reminds me kind of, that this point reminds me of kind of like Paul's hardships and the things he went through. 2 Corinthians 6:3-5 says, we live in such a way that no one will stumble because of us, and no one will find fault with our ministry. In everything we do, we show that we are true ministers of God. We patiently endure troubles and hardships and calamities of every kind. We have been beaten, been put in prison, faced angry mobs, worked to exhaustion, endured sleepless nights, and gone without food. And that's kind of where, I felt, you feel like you're in a prison. You feel like you're, you just feel like you're being beat up. Your life is just gone as you know it. And I feel like, that Paul was a really good example of how he was able to be patient and put up with things, even, some terrible things that he was put through. Another verse, and this is a more popular one, is Philippians 4:6-7. Do not be anxious for anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus.
So I'm betting now, when I'm thinking about your story, and first of all, I can't imagine how life was just so good. The sun was shining, you could feel the wind blowing, and everything was, and then all of a sudden this tornado comes into your life. But now I'm thinking that probably when you were reading those scriptures, while they meant something to you, now looking back, they have much greater value, because you can actually see the worth of how they really did affect your life. Even though you may not have felt it then, these scriptures were exactly that was going on, but you couldn't visibly see probably, but you could feel spiritually.
I think back then I looked at these scriptures as a way of survival and a way of hope. And now I look back at it, I look at these scriptures as truth and victory. Yeah. And, so another scripture is in Hebrews 10:36. You need to keep on patiently doing God's will if you want him to do for you all that he has promised. So even, in the midst of everything, going to church, being in choir, those things, I was able to do those, even when inside I felt like I was dying at times. I would come home and from work to, an empty house and just not knowing, but, I still was able to have the strength and the faith to keep doing God's will, even in the midst of all that. And he did, reward me and do the things that he promised in the end. And I had to keep faith that would happen, in the midst of it. Romans 12:12, be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer. And again, that's just another example of how you need to stay in God's will, even when you don't feel like it. Galatians 6:9, and let us not get tired of doing what is right, for after a while we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't get discouraged and give up.
I love that one right there. I claim that one a lot. It's just like, don't grow weary in doing good. In due time. It's not our time, which we want it now. I want to feel better now.
Exactly.
Yes, I love that one too. Good.
Yes. So the point again of all those is that God expects us to be patient and continue to do his will, even when we are going through terrible times. Honestly, this was a turning point for me in my situation. I think that God was getting my attention in ways that he needed to. And, that had nothing to do with my marriage, that had to do with me and my relationship with him. And I was in no way finished learning about patience and how I truly needed God in my life, because after months of confusion and trying to figure things out, it was revealed to me the real reason behind the separation. And it was another person that he worked with, that he had become involved with. And, and honestly, I was almost relieved when I found that out, because it made more sense to me than I love you one day and I don't love you the next.
Wow, it makes you keep wondering what's wrong with me, and so
Exactly.
that kind of made you have a little more peace in that sense. And
Yes.
okay, there's
Yes.
somebody else. I get it.
Yep. Yep. But my story doesn't end there, and I think you know that because I've talked to you about it before.
Yes.
It was really just the beginning of my tested patience. Before finding out about the other person, my parents called and they said, we're going to Myrtle Beach. Let's go to Myrtle Beach. Come with us. You need to get away from all the craziness, just come on with us. So I did. And that was in mid-June of 97. And this had been going on since March. And we went on vacation, and it was a good vacation, but my mom had been not feeling well. She complained about her back hurting when she walked, unless she walked a certain way. And we just thought, muscle spasm, you don't think of anything. And so we had a vacation. She came back. They live in Ashland. I lived in Lexington at the time. So I went back to Lexington, back to my life. And when I did find out about the other person, I called my parents and I said, I just wanted to let you know there's another person. And my mom was on the phone and she said, well, you don't need him anyway. And she said, here, talk to your dad. And I thought that was really, really odd that she just got off the phone that quick. And what I had learned in that conversation is that my mom had been suffering from a really, really bad headache since we had gotten back, and that she had been really sick, and she'd been to the emergency room, and no one could find anything wrong with her other than she was a completely healthy 48-year-old woman with a headache. So she was struggling with that, and she didn't even feel well enough to talk to me. That's how bad she felt. And so, I got off the phone with them, and it wasn't long. In fact, June 27th of 97, I was at work and I got a call from my aunt who lives in Michigan at the time.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm thinking, why is my aunt from Michigan calling me? And she had just called my mom's house, and my 11-year-old sister had answered the phone, and they said that my dad had taken my mom to the hospital. And so she called me to say, do you know your mom is on the way to the hospital? And I was like, no, I don't know that. So needless to say, she was put in the hospital on June 27th. She woke up. She didn't know who anybody was, didn't know what day it was. She had swelling in her brain, which caused her to eventually have some strokes. There were tests after tests. This went on for weeks. Brain biopsies. Any test you could think of. At one point, they were treating her for 8 different things because they had no idea what she had. They had done a spinal tap at they very first put her in the hospital, and 8 weeks later, it finally showed something. But before that, during all this time, I'm still communicating with my husband and trying to figure out, okay, what's going on. So I'm trying to save my marriage, and I'm in Ashland trying to take care of my 11-year-old sister and support my dad and be at the hospital. And, it was just a really rotten time in my life.
Well, and you really hadn't you were still going through the first storm, right?
Yes.
And then comes the second one right behind. Kind of like we've had these ice and flooding all one after the other. Give us a break, right?
Yes.
I can imagine how even more overwhelmed you felt at that time.
Yeah, I told people about that I am a complete nutcase because, I'm trying to figure out what's going on with my marriage. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with my mom, and we have no idea what's going on with her. And I had used up all my vacation time, all my sick time. And it was kind of at the point where I had to decide, am I going back to Lexington? Am I staying in Ashland? What am I doing? And at the time I called my husband and I said, do I have anything to come back to? If I have something to come back to, I will come back. And at that time, he said, yes, I want you to come back.
Wow.
So I did. It was terrible leaving my family and coming back, but I had to try to save my marriage too. So it didn't take long to figure out that wasn't going to be the end for us. There was still communication going on with the other person. They still worked at the same place.
Of course.
It was just, obvious. And then one weekend I went home to, just because I would commute. I would work through the week and then commute on the weekends and go home and spend the weekend in Ashland and then come back and work through the week again. And this particular week, it was about 8 weeks after my mom got sick and was put in the hospital, that they came back and said, we know what is wrong. Her culture that we took the first day she was put in the hospital has now grown tuberculosis. And they said that she had tuberculosis meningitis, which basically is TB in your brain instead of where it normally is. And that's what was causing the strokes. And at that time, that weekend, she was still at a point where if you walked in the room and said, Mom, squeeze my hand, she could squeeze your hand. She still could, know what was going on. But it was also that weekend that she had one of the strokes that really did some damage. In fact, they called the family, and we didn't think it was going to be a week, before we would be having a funeral. But no one could say, no, there's no chance. And no one could say, yes, she's going to get better. And my dad had to make a decision to treat the tuberculosis. He's a pharmacist, so he has enough medical knowledge, that he knew, and he's a Christian, a devout Christian. And he knew that if God wanted to heal her, he would. And he knew enough medically that, he wasn't ready to give up. I mean, she was literally his life.
I can't imagine.
They had been married. I think they had just celebrated 30 years when this happened. Because she was 48 and they were married on her 18th birthday. So, he made the decision to treat it. And at this point, I made the decision to quit my job and move back to Ashland, because I felt like my husband had kind of made his decision, even though I was still hanging on to hope. But I just felt like I was needed here more. So I moved home and started on a journey of taking care of my siblings and helping my dad however I could. My life completely changed. I had no job, no husband, no home. I was living with my dad. He was supporting me. I mean, my life literally was stripped away. And it was, I don't even know how to explain it other than I just did. I mean, it's like I was going this way and I turned and went this way, and there's nothing, it's crazy.
And it's kind of like your life was leveled in the fact that, not only were you losing your marriage, you were on the verge of possibly losing your mom, and then losing your independence of supporting yourself.
Yes.
I mean, so I'm seeing, I have chills just listening to this, and I've heard it before, but it just, I don't know, but just thinking about you're turning, every time that you turn around, you are in another battle fighting again for your life or your mom's life or your marriage and your survival. And I'm just, I'm so happy to hear your testimony to how that you've come through, and you always smile and you're always happy now. And I'm just so thankful to see that. So keep on going then.
Okay. And another thing, another factor that you don't think about is I had an 11-year-old sister who now, I basically had to start taking her to school, and she talked me into being a cheerleading coach of all things, because she was in 6th grade, I think. And so she decided that I should be a cheerleading coach. So I was like, sure, why not? And it kept us busy. And really my mission at that point was to support my dad however I could, but really it was to take care of my sister so that he didn't have to think about that.
Right.
And he could focus on what he was focusing on. But, we were put in a situation of waiting. We had no idea how long this was going to go on. And we most definitely could not have predicted that it would go on for 15 years. That's how
your mom was sick for 15 years.
She was in the hospital in somewhat of a vegetative coma for 15 years. And so one of the other lessons that I've learned through some of this is sometimes we have no control over our situation. Absolutely. And patience is the only answer.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm going to write that. No control over a situation, but patience is the only answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the verse that I found for that is James 5:7. Dear brothers and sisters, be patient as you wait for the Lord's return. Consider the farmers who patiently wait for the rains in the fall and in the spring. They eagerly look for the valuable harvest to ripen. So sometimes we don't have control and we must wait, just like the farmer who has no control over whether his crops will ripen or not. He has to wait. I had no control over the situation with my husband. I had no control over his feelings. I had no control over what he was doing when I gave him space. Had no control over, my mom's illness. No control over how long we would have to wait. And we just were simply expected to go on with life and wait for all this to be figured out. And we just had to wait for God to intervene in however he was going to intervene and whatever his will was. And another verse that I found was Isaiah 40:31. Yet those who wait for the Lord will gain new strength, will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not become weary. And I can't say that I always ran and I walked without becoming tired. I had very many days where I was tired. I was at the edge of, jumping off a bridge at the end of my rope. But God gave me the strength to be patient in ways that no one could imagine. And I could have never imagined that I would have been able to. And my prayers even changed because of patience. For a long time, it was, please get mom better, please heal her, please make her better, please, it was all about making her better. And my prayers changed to, what is your will, whatever that is, after 15 years or even 3 years, you have to finally get to a point where, you have to be patient, but you also have to think, okay, there's a reason for this. And I can't even tell you the number of things that were positive that came out of this experience that was so terrible. And so many things, but I'm trying to focus on patience today, but I could tell you so many other ways that God has, taught me things and has taught other people things. And my mom, just her story, and my dad's, going to the hospital every single night. He would go to work and then he would sit with her every single night, for 15 years. The only time he would not go and visit her is if he was on a mission trip in the Philippines or if he's at church or something like that. But people, quick story, but when my mom first got in the hospital and my dad was such a, he was always beside her and always he never left her. For the first 72 days, he didn't leave her barely to go take a shower. And the nurses would tell him, your wife is so lucky to have you. And he would just look at him and say, no, I'm the lucky one, to have her. And one other little quick story, just because there's so many in this, but when they took her down after some of her strokes to do the brainwave test, to where they do things and see if she has brain activity, they had taken her in and they were doing things and they weren't having a whole lot of luck getting reaction from her. But my dad walked in the room and started talking. And they said the brainwave thing just started doing that. So as soon as he heard his voice, she heard his voice. So they had it's storybook love, and just an example of what a marriage should look like.
That must have been somewhat confusing for you because you were seeing the real deal, what marriage, you're going to make me cry about all this, but the what marriage is supposed to be, right? I'm thinking about your dad, it's killing me. And his faithfulness to be there. And then I think when you first started, you said something about the words when he come home, he says, I don't know if I love you enough to stay. And then I see the very opposite going on with your dad. And I think about, the one thing that you're guaranteed that you never have to worry about is God will never leave your side. And I think about your dad sitting there, and maybe she didn't even know that he was sitting there. I think that's how God is sometimes. We could be in the worst case scenario position, and he's still sitting right there day after day after his faithfulness is. You've torn me up tonight because I'm emotional now. I'm so sorry. I've just got so caught up in all these scriptures and your story. So awesome.
Another thing that I thought about when I was thinking about how I was going to kind of talk about this is just, a couple of people in the Bible that, obviously patience was a big part of their story. And Joseph, I believe, is somebody who had to wait patiently through a lot of
Oh
things
yeah.
to get where he ended up being. He was sold, he was put in prison, but through that all, he kept the faith and God blessed him in ways that were unimaginable. But I think obviously Job is probably the ultimate, thing about bad things happening to good people. He was a wealthy man, but he lost his sheep, his servants, his children, but he continued to praise God through it. Then he had the skin sores, and he would not denounce God for any way, for any reason, even when his friends said, well, you must have done something bad, for this to deserve it. He said, no, and the thing that I think is important to point out in that story is he does question God. He does, and I questioned God many times, what is going on? Why is this happening? My mom did nothing to deserve this.
Yes.
My mom was the kind of mom that would go pick up my sister's friends that their parents wouldn't take them to church. She was like the
mom.
She was like the mom that went around and picked up all the friends that she knew wasn't able to go to church if she didn't go pick them up. And, and now, what's going to happen to these people? And, and I even know some of those people today that look back and go, your mom changed my life just by picking me up and taking me to church. But, God intervenes and rewards Job with, even more blessing at the end, because he never gave up, faith and hope. And so that's kind of what you have to think, so, and I kind of correlate it to my story, that in 1997, I lost my husband, I lost my mom, I lost my job, my life as I knew it. Nothing was the same. I could have been bitter and I could have blamed God. And there were probably times that I was angry and questioned him, but I endured the suffering, waiting for God to reveal over time, what was going to happen. It was the worst time of my life. I can't imagine a worse, I can't think of any other time in my life that I was ever at that low of a point. But I never gave up hope in God, and I never gave up the faith that he was going to get me through this, because he always put people in my way, or he always would reveal something through me, through church, or through a message at church, or through something somebody says, and in the end, I came out and I'm a stronger, more faithful person because of it. So, and then I feel like that has taught me patience for other things, like things that I've dealt with, since all that happened. For instance, I have a daughter who's 16 and a son who's 12. My daughter, since she was very young, has been a very anxious person. And there were days that if it'd been anybody else, it was her parent besides me, I think they probably would have killed her. But somehow I was patient enough to be like, you know what, this is who she is. And I've got to just embrace this. And I've got to, figure out a way to get, to not let this defeat me in a way that I think if I had not had been tested with patience in the past, I probably would have had my hair pulled out and been like ready to kill her. And, in work, just like you said, you say, I always call you and you're so patient. I mean, I have people at work that'll say, I know I can come to you because you're so patient and I can ask you 50 times and you won't care to repeat yourself. And I really do not, because I am a patient person. And I feel like, back to the definition of it's very similar to compassion. Mm-hmm. And I have compassion for people. And, I know people don't get something the first time or even the third time.
Or the fifth time.
Or the fifth time, but I don't get frustrated with people like that, because, I don't get everything the first time or the fifth time. So, I feel like that I try to put myself in people's shoes, and I always try to look at the way their perception of it as best I can, because, not everybody sees things the way I do. And what I think might be really stupid to get upset over is a huge thing for somebody else. And I've learned that through having a daughter who has anxiety, and a husband really who deals with anxiety. I'm surrounded by anxious people, so I feel like there's a reason I'm surrounded by them, is because I hopefully can help them with that, by being patient and not getting so frustrated. I get frustrated. I'm not perfect in any way, and I'm not always patient, but I feel like that I'm probably a little more patient than your average person.
Oh, I would agree with that too. And I think it's not when I call you or need help, or, as I've been on this learning journey with the job, that it's like I could probably call it at a not even a good time, but you're going to even take the time to walk me through it, not just tell me something, but let me see what we can do to help me to solve a problem. And
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I think that has come through so much when I think about your life and how it's been leveled. And then I agree with what you say, because you were fighting. It just wasn't one. You said, that was the worst time of your life, but it's just not the one worst time. It's like the three worst times all rolled
Right.
into one,
All in one.
dealing with all of that. And so
Yeah.
you have given me a total new perspective on patience, because that's why I love words now, and I love this word of the week, because what we hear the word all the time, we think well, I know what patience is, not losing your cool, right? But then
Yeah.
when you have given these scriptures based upon how they were pertinent to your situation, it
Right.
really gives a whole new, different meaning of patience.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Yeah. I mean, when I first started thinking about this word, I'm like, I know that I'm a patient person, and I know I learned patience through these struggles that I had, but I really had to like think, okay, how, because it's hard when you're talking about it to be able to say, okay, this means this. But
Yes.
I just sat down, and the first thing I did is I just kind of looked through, I Googled patience, patience in the Bible. And I used other words that, it might not be patience, but it might be wait,
Yeah.
wait. And then I made a list of Bible verses, and then I just kind of started studying those Bible verses and seeing how they applied at different parts of my life and different aspects of my life and the things that I've learned. And it just kind of showed me really that I have learned a lot about patience through my struggles. And I think that's one of the reasons I can be a more patient person now, because I've had to wait. We waiting 15 years for closure on my mom's illness was, I feel like at the end, I had already mourned the loss, because really, when you walked into a room, for the longest time, you walked in and you would say, "Hey, mom," and she wouldn't look at you, but you knew she could hear you. And so, but she couldn't say, "Oh, hey, Robin," so there had been 15 years of no real communication with my mom. So a lot of me had mourned her loss, but a lot of me knew God could fix it if that was his will. And I can't sit here and say that I understand or will ever understand why that happened. But I know there's been a lot of lessons learned because of it.
I think there's been a lot of seeds sown in your heart and your life, and God has watered and nurtured those. And while it's something none of us would want to accept or think about, you have literally, it's either bitter or better, and you have
Yeah.
used it to better. And I think probably if you look back now too, thinking about where you said, you were kind of hitting and missing church and all those things, even though all the agony and painful things you went through, I feel like it was worth it for you, because you had this strong relationship with Jesus, and you had that
Yeah.
feeling of no one's going to leave me, and you had that support through him. Not that you would want to go through it again, but
Right.
I guess what you gained through it all has been worth it
Right.
for that
Yeah.
sacrifice. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, Robin, your story, I could just talk on and on about this. And even though I have heard it a few times, I'm just like,
Yeah.
okay, it's still, and the way you have tied the word patience in it. And I appreciate that so much. If, in closing, is there anything that you would like to say to anybody that might be going through one of the three storms that you are going through? Like, it's rare to hear of things like that all the time.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
is there some advice that you could give another woman on here to think about, if you're going through that with your husband, if you're going through that with an illness, or if you're going through that with the job loss? What would you say to them?
I would just say that God will get you through it if you depend on him and you have faith in him and you stay connected to him, and you're in his will as best you can be. there are days, again, like I said, that I would not, I just wanted to be mad. I wanted to, you go through all the stages of loss, but at the same time, in the back of your head, this is okay, and God understands this. But know that you can always depend on Him to put the people in your life and put the events and the experiences and the God moments, that I call it, in your life, that you might not know they're a God moment at the time, but you can look back and God got me through that. God, that was totally God. There's no other explanation than that. And I would also say that, we're going to have really bad things happen to us, and it might not look like mine. It might be just, a breakup with a husband, or it might be, a loss of a family member, or it might be, a loss of a job. And your normal is not going to be your normal anymore. And what I always tell people is you have to create a new normal, and you have to look at, in my case, it was, what would Mom want us to do? Would she want us to sit around here and just be bitter and be angry and not move forward with our life? Or would she want us to be, try to make a new normal that, and it's not easy. It's not easy to make that new normal, but it's so important that you don't let things like this defeat you. You don't let things like this break up a family. I see so many families that go through something like this, and instead of it getting you closer, it just breaks you apart. And I would say, love each other, love your family, and keep them close, especially through things like this. But I would just say, depend on God. If you don't have Him, find Him, because I could not have imagined going through that year if I did not have Him. I probably would be either an alcoholic or a drug addict, or, I don't know what I would have been if I hadn't had Him to get me through it and to give me the strength that I needed.
He's the best coping medicine.
Yes.
And I think about you, and I'm going to close this. I know we went long, but I think about you going through all this and this devastation, like kind of wonder, and I feel like I can just see God moving people in place. Just He's arranging things, and you just have, all you have to do is just keep moving forward. And so, your story has been beautiful. I appreciate you sharing the raw stuff, and I say this all the time: if women like us would just share the ugly stuff, it will help so many other women. And while we're having to wear a mask now for another reason, we need to stop wearing that one mask. So we've been through the ringer. Yes, we have, but we're here to tell our story now. And Robin, I appreciate you for not only being my friend at work, but who you are in Christ, and the testimony that you leave. And it's like when people have been with you and fellowship with you and been in your presence, that aroma is still there. That sweet feeling that you make people feel just so welcome. And I appreciate you so much for taking time to do this with us.
Well, I appreciate you asking, and I'm glad I was able to share the story.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Robin. And ladies, we'll be back again on next Monday night with another guest and another word of the week.